Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar, When Machines Go Shopping. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We're going to have 20 minutes. We've got quite a lot to get through, so I'll try and keep the pace up, but hopefully it will be useful for everybody. So, to kick things off, let me start with a quick thought experiment, and that's, what if your next million customers never visited your website? So imagine they never never see your homepage, they never click an ad, they scroll a category page. Instead, they get recommended directly by an AI agent. So in this scenario, where does the thinking happen? What form does this thinking take? And crucially, what can you do about it? So these are the questions that we're going to be going into over the next 20 minutes or so. So to introduce myself, my name's Greg. I'm the co-founder and CTO of Ocular Technologies. And what we do is we use agents to build agents that generate data to be consumed by other agents. So everything that follows is based on our daily experience and the impact that we're seeing with a fantastic customer base of enterprise retailers across the UK and North America. So let's just recap on the old shopping journey, and this slide tends to give me shivers every time I see it. So how did we used to do things? Well, the shopping journey was incredibly fragmented. You'd open Google, you'd have a bunch of tabs open, you'd read listicles, you would watch videos. If you were really desperate, you might resort to the family WhatsApp group. And as a brand, it meant that you had dozens of touch points in this journey. The problem was it was exhausting, it took a long time, and you ended up going round and round in circles. However, a lot of thinking happens in this process, and a lot of mini decisions are being made all the while. So fast forward to where we are now, AI can do all of that research on our behalf and in a fraction of the time. Now, this is great news because we obviously get a lot of the time back. But the point here that I really want to dig into is that thinking and reasoning about your products still takes place in this new world. It just takes a radically different form, and we'll deep dive on this in a moment. But before we do, I just want to address anyone who might be skeptical about the urgency here on the call today. It's not a prediction, this is already happening. So here's the obligatory slide with some big numbers and a McKinsey citation. But the point is that consumer behavior has already changed, and the potential size of the prize here is really astronomical. So the question for everybody on the call is no longer whether to adapt, but how fast. What makes this different from other previous AI hype cycles is that the infrastructure is already live. So the protocols exist, the integrations are running, and major retailers are signing up. So let me show you what I mean. Okay, so two major protocols have emerged. We have the ACP, so that's the Agentic Commerce Protocol developed by OpenAI and Stripe, powering ChatGPT Commerce, and the Universal Commerce Protocol, UCP, developed by Google and Shopify, powering AI Search Mode and Gemini. So these are defined APIs that let agents reason about your products. They can query your catalog, check real-time availability, and initiate transactions on behalf of the user. So think of these as schema.org for the agentic era. So I was at Google Cloud Next a few weeks ago, where Wayfair was speaking how they co-developed this with UCP, and they're now live with over 1 million products on the protocol. So what this means is they're not theoretical specs. The practical reality is that most retailers will need to support both because they unlock different ecosystems. So let's have a look at OpenAI first and Perplexity. So OpenAI have been testing instant checkout in the US, but actually scaled it back in March, which is really interesting. Instead, they want to, instead of owning the checkout themselves, they'll be directing to merchants' own native checkouts, meaning that their focus now is really on product discovery. And only this week, they announced OpenAI Ads, which is a new feed allowing your products to be served as ads on ChatGPT. By contrast to this, Perplexity took a different approach. So they launched Instant Buy in late 2025, letting customers check out directly in the chat with PayPal as one of the payment options. So the number that's interesting to focus on here is that shoppers referred to merchants from Perplexity were spent 57% more per order than via other AI platforms. So the point that we're trying to make here isn't that frictionless checkout drives higher average order value. That's the kind of bland and obvious point to make. What we're saying here is that different AI platforms attract different shopper profiles. So Perplexity's citation-rich, research-heavy approach at the moment is attracting shoppers with higher purchasing intent. So when you start tracking agent-referred conversations, it's important to segment by source and don't lump all traffic into one bucket because it isn't homogeneous. So product discovery has never been easier with AI agents, but they lean on very, very different signals to those that humans do. So as a quick mental model, before I show you the framework, when a shopper asks ChatGPT for product recommendation, what the model is doing is it rewrites the conversational query into structured searches. So it pulls in parallel from web search, structured product feeds and reviews, and it chunks everything up into very small pieces, and ranks each one of those chunks for relevance. And it synthesizes all of the top ranked chunks into a natural language answer. So the thing to notice is at no point is the model reading your full PDP top to bottom. It's pulling chunks, it's evaluating attributes, and it synthesizes. Therefore, the optimization playbook needs to change. So the first thing I want to introduce as an important data attribute that you need to be thinking about is product highlights. So as I just mentioned, when an agent reads the product page, it doesn't read the whole page at once. It breaks the content into small semantic chunks, as few as 50 words at a time. And it's evaluating each one of those chunks in isolation. So there's no narrative thread, there's no assumed context, and each section therefore needs to stand on its own two legs and make sense on its own. So if you start to use words like it or this without context, the AI agent gets confused and it doesn't understand and it won't recommend your products. So I want one of the takeaways to be reframe how you think about product highlights. They're not just marketing copy, they're valuable data points. So write them like you're populating a fact sheet and they can exist on their own and be understandable out of context. You're not writing a brochure. Okay. The next is Q&A pairs. So when a shopper asks a specific question and an agent can't find the answer, it either skips your product or it starts to hallucinate and make something up. Both are obviously bad. So creating clear sets of Q&A pairs for each product on your site is a brilliant way to combat that potential for hallucination. By answering common customer questions, what you're doing is you're giving the LLMs a script to feed back to people asking for product recommendations or advice. So one of the most common mistakes that we're seeing retailers make is actually rebadging the specs table as Q&A. If the specs already exist in the product data feed, the LLM has access to it. So by rewriting them as question and answers, at best you're missing an opportunity, at worst you're introducing noise into the signal. So a simple test for you here is to think, could a shopper work this information out from the spec table? If so, it doesn't belong in a Q&A pair. If not, it does. And some examples on the slide here, exactly the kind of long tail questions that never make it into structured data. Okay, so once the agent has, or the model has gone, grabbed the data, chunked it into small pieces, it's potentially matched to match exact questions to a Q&A pair, it needs a reason to start to rank those different chunks and to return them to a user of everything that it's found. So in order for the agent to pick one from many, we need to start thinking about competitive differentiators. So if everything in your category looks the same. In the structured data, it will start to pick on price, availability, or randomness. The differentiators state explicitly what makes your product distinct within its category. So things like, is it lighter than any other model? Or running shoes specially made for people with wide feet? And this matters now more than ever because LLMs are stripping brand layer from their answers. So the customer doesn't need to see your logo or your hero shot. What they see is a synthesized recommendation, and the differentiators are the only signal that starts to survive. So here's an example of that in practice. So I search for best running shoes under £100 in ChatGPT, and this is the result. So what you'll notice immediately is that ChatGPT didn't give me a single answer, gave me several. So on Google, if someone searched for best running shoes, you basically need to rank for that phrase. It's quite simple. When someone types that same thing into ChatGPT, it explodes the query out into comfort, durability, use case, price, performance, and so on. And then it starts to build a full answer back from all of that synthesized information. So now you're not optimizing for one query. Your product content needs to be rich enough that AI can find you across multiple different angles of that query fan out. So it's a reasoned set of recommendations, each one matched to a specific use case, and it's doing the job that blog post comparison sites and every product category page used to do. So brands that appear in results like this don't get there by accident. They get there because the product data was rich enough for the AI agent to understand who would use the shoe and why. So the final data point that I want you to think about here in how to win with agentic commerce are use cases and intent tags. So with search increasingly becoming more conversational, a user is going to ask, 10 or more words to give queries with full context. So here's an example, which is real from one of our clients: suggest durable pants with lots of pockets for shift work. Look at that prompt. There's little to no keywords actually in it. So what the agent does in this context is it starts to translate the intent into product attributes, but it can only do that if your data already speaks the language of intent. So what you need to think about here are intent tags, which essentially act as the bridge. So you need to state exactly who your product is for and the specific problems that it solves. And if we fast forward a little bit further into the future, if we can project, what I'm describing only gets more exacerbated with voice-based queries. A 10+ word query over typing becomes 25 or more words when people speak. So the intent context becomes a lot richer, which is a great opportunity. But the flip side of that means that the need for parsable additive attributes becomes even more acute. So let's put some of this into practice. So AI rewards freshness and authenticity. So a product review, a Reddit comment, or an editorial mention, all of these can matter more than brand written copy because they're user generated. So increasingly, models are checking whether your product information aligns with the broader online consensus. And this is where there's a huge opportunity to boost trust signals and therefore improve discoverability. So what if that new product review turns into an actual product use case? This Reddit thread that we can see here informed your product's Q&A, and the editorial informed your product differentiators. So what if all of that user-generated content or user-generated copy integrates seamlessly into your product copy? Well, here's what this could look like. The static product listing now turns into an always-on, always enriched, high conversion page that AI agents will always prioritize. Going from the left to the right, you can see how having the structured information of the use cases populates the perfect for tags. All of the highlights, Q&A pairs are there to directly answer user queries, and the differentiators, again, give the LLM or the model a reason to return that chunk of your information versus a competitor's. So in addition to those 4 really crucial data points, it would obviously be remiss of me not to mention the unsexy stuff, the basics of AEO and GEO. So GTIN, MPN identifiers, making sure that you have structured shipping data, real-time stock information, not just batch updated. So none of these wins you anything on its own, but all of these missing mean that you don't get cited at all. And trust is more important than ever. So in addition to being aligned with that broader online consensus I mentioned a moment ago, your data needs to be clean, clear, and reliable, or LLMs will start ignoring your sites. So think about how Google treats sites that consistently disappoint users. This is exactly the same principle, but the feedback loop is even faster and harsher. Just to bring this to life as an example, if your feed says in stock and you're actually out, the agent hits merchandise not available error, and then it just stops surfacing your products. So the trust degrades incredibly fast and recovers very slowly, meaning that your data, your product data, it needs to be live and not lagging. So most product content pipelines were built to serve a Google crawler and a human reader, and that was fine 15 years ago, or even 5 years ago. It's not fine now. So hopefully I've demonstrated that the gap between what AI agents need and how they think and what most retailers currently provide is very, very wide. And that gap is both a problem and an opportunity. But the scale is where the rubber hits the road. So let's imagine a retailer with 100,000 SKUs. Each one of those needs an enriched title, an enriched description, say around 30 structured attributes, all the use case tags, the compatibility data, competitive differentiators, everything that I've just discussed, along with multilingual variants and all the channel-specific formatting as well. If we take a conservative estimate of around 15 minutes per SKU, that quickly explodes to 12 people working full-time for just over a year. And that's just to reach the baseline. So that's before you start to account for the fact that you need to constantly evolve the data because products change, pricing changes, and the conversation about your products is evolving over time. The UGC is constantly changing, and you want to make sure that you're pulling on all of the latest and most relevant signals. So this is obviously a terrible task for humans to do, but it's a perfect task for AI agents to do. And you might be sat thinking, who might be able to help me and provide an agent like that? This obviously isn't a sales call, so I'll allow you to draw your own conclusions around that one. Cool. So how do we track success? So you need a new language, new ways of measurement. Alongside the organic rankings, look at citation rates. Are you being mentioned in LLM responses for your category? Don't just look at page views, look at referred conversations from other platforms as well. And I want to leave you with 5 things to do. So audit your data, map every attribute to what an AI agent actually needs. Based upon your findings, enrich your data. Don't do this manually. Use an AI agent to do this. Ensure that all of your product data is consistent and unified across all the different channels. And start setting up a baseline. Start tracking whether LLMs can actually find your products. So before we move on, if you'd like to see a couple of your products enriched for agentic commerce, what that might mean in terms of that audit, then please do take a minute to let us know. I believe there's a poll in the comments. There's a couple of different options we could use to do that. So please follow us on LinkedIn for all industry updates and more content like this. Book a demo if you'd like to see what that might look like. But I do want to leave you with a final closing thought. And that's that retailers who invest in structured, enriched product information now will be compounding their advantage as agentic commerce starts to scale. And the brands that don't will spend the next couple of years catching up. Thank you so much for listening. I'm happy to take any questions.